Today is day 2 for the Come Follow Me study for this week, October 27th through November 2nd. A house unto my name. Doctrine and Covenants 124. Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. Doctrine and Covenants 124, 15 through 28. Hiram Smith, David W. Patton, Joseph Smith Sr., and others among the living and the dead are blessed for their integrity and virtues. Doctrine and Covenants 124, 15. And again, verily I say unto you, blessed is my servant Hiram Smith, for I the Lord love him because of the integrity of his heart, and because he loveth that which is right before me, saith the Lord. Elder Joseph B. Worthland said, I personally know of no higher praise that any man could receive. Integrity means a state of completeness. Thus, to have integrity of heart is to be whole or complete in personal purity, honesty, and uprightness. After quoting the Lord's words describing Hiram Smith, Elder Joseph B. Worthland of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles taught, to me, integrity means always doing what is right and good, regardless of the immediate consequences. It means being righteous from the very depth of our soul, not only in our actions, but more importantly, in our thoughts and in our hearts. Personal integrity implies such truthfulness and incorruptibility that we are incapable of being false to a trust or covenant. Hiram Smith exemplified integrity of heart and love of righteousness in his unwavering support of the prophet and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Describing his brother Hiram, the prophet Joseph Smith wrote, I could pray in my heart that all my brethren were like unto my beloved brother Hiram, who possesses the mildness of a lamb and the integrity of a Job, and in short, the meekness and humility of Christ. And I love him with that love that is stronger than death. President Heber J. Grant described Hiram Smith as follows: no mortal man who ever lived in this church desired more to do good than did Hiram Smith, the patriarch. I have it from the lips of my own sainted mother that of all the men she was acquainted with in her girlhood days in Nauvoo, she admired Hiram Smith most for his absolute integrity and devotion to God and his loyalty to the prophet of God. Elder M. Russell Ballard said, there is much in this noble man's character that is worthy of emulation. I would like to be as loyal to my family and friends as Hiram was to his younger brother Joseph. One historian noted that Hiram guarded his younger and more favored brother as tenderly as if the prophet had been his son instead of his younger brother. When the boy Joseph was stricken with a serious leg infection, it was his teenage brother Hiram who tenderly applied pressure to the afflicted limb night and day for more than a week. President Joseph Fielding Smith observed, it seems almost from the tender solicitude Hiram displayed for Joseph that he felt in some way that there had been placed upon him a guardianship for his younger brother. Such loyalty is rare. Remember how the elder sons of Jacob treated their younger brother Joseph. They were so jealous of his favored position that they sold him into slavery and convinced their grief-stricken father that he had been killed by wild beasts. And consider the strained relationship between young Joseph and his elder brothers Laman and Lemuel. Their envy was so bitter that it served as a foundation for centuries of heartache and civil war. But you'll find none of that in the recorded history of Hiram's relationship with Joseph. Rather, you'll find a lifetime of loving devotion, service, kindness, and consistency. It would please me more than I can say to have such things said of me by those who are in a position to evaluate my loyalty. Faithful Hiram had a believing heart. He did not have to see everything Joseph saw. For him, hearing the truth from Joseph's lips and feeling the spiritual promptings whispering that it was true were enough. Faith to believe was the source of Hiram's spiritual strength and is the source of the spiritual strength of faithful members of the church then and today. We do not need more members who question every detail. We need members who have felt with their hearts, who live close to the Spirit, and who follow its promptings joyfully. We need seeking hearts and minds that welcome gospel truths without argument or complaint, and without requiring miraculous manifestation. Oh, how we are blessed when members respond joyfully to counsel from their bishops, stake presidents, quorum and auxiliary leaders, some of whom might be younger than they and less experienced. What great blessings we receive when we follow that which is right, joyfully and not grudgingly. Why do you think the Lord approves of and trusts those who have integrity of heart? Ponder what you will do to have more integrity. Doctrine and Covenants 124, 16 through 17. Again, let my servant John C. Bennett help you in your labor in sending my word to the kings and people of the earth, and stand by you, even you, my servant Joseph Smith, in the hour of affliction, and his reward shall not fail if he receive counsel. And for his love he shall be great, for he shall be mine if he do this, saith the Lord. I have seen the work which he hath done, which I accept, if he continue, and will crown him with blessings and great glory. The prophet Joseph Smith said, January 8, 1841, during our persecutions in Missouri, John C. Bennett became acquainted with the violence we were suffering while in that state, on account of our religion. His sympathy for us was aroused, and his indignation kindled against our persecutors for the cruelties practiced upon us, and their flagrant violation of both the law and the Constitution. Amidst their heated zeal to put down the truth, he addressed us a letter tendering to us his association in delivering us out of the hands of our enemies, and restoring us again to our privileges, and only required at our hands to point out the way, and he would be forthcoming, with all the forces he could raise for the purpose. He has been one of the instruments in effecting our safety and deliverance from the unjust persecutions and demands of the authorities of Missouri, and also in procuring the city charter. He is a man of enterprise, extensive requirements, and of independent mind, and is calculated to be a great blessing to our community. The Lord called John C. Bennett, a new convert to the church, to help the prophet Joseph Smith in sending his word to the kings and people of the earth. The Lord also noted that he had seen the work that Brother Bennett had done, possibly referring to the help he had given in drafting and obtaining approval for the Nauvoo City Charter. After the prophet Joseph Smith received the revelation recorded in Doctrine and Covenants 124, Brother Bennett became an influential leader in Nauvoo. He was elected as the city's first mayor and appointed as the chancellor of the University of Nauvoo and major general of the Nauvoo Legion. Furthermore, in April 1841, during the General Conference of the Church, he was called to serve as an assistant to the First Presidency until Sidney Rigdon, who was then ill, regained his health. Smith and Sholdahl wrote that John C. Bennett was well educated and possessed many gifts and accomplishments. He was a physician, a university professor, and brigadier general. On the 27th of July, 1840, he offered his services to the church. The prophet Joseph replied, inviting him to come to commerce if he felt so disposed, but warned him at the same time not to expect exaltation in this generation from devotion to the cause of truth and a suffering people, nor worldly riches, only the approval of God. The outcome of the correspondence was that he joined the church and rose to prominent positions among the saints. His fellowship with the people of God did not last long, however. Unfortunately, John C. Bennett's rise to prominence in Nauvoo was short-lived. He used both his government and ecclesiastical positions to spread damaging rumors about Joseph Smith, plot an assassination attempt, and claim spiritual license to seduce women. He promoted the false doctrine of spiritual wifery, which taught that sexual relations were permissible outside of legalized marital relationships, on condition that the relations remained secret. He was excommunicated from the church in May 1842, after which he embarked on a speaking tour addressing the perceived evils of Joseph Smith and Mormonism, and published an anti-Mormon history of the church. Smith and Shodall continued. On the 25th of May, 1842, he was notified that the leaders of the church did no longer recognize him as a member because of his impure life, and shortly afterwards the church took action against him. Then he became one of the most bitter enemies of the church. His slanders, his falsehoods, and unscrupulous attacks, which included perjury and attempted assassination, were the means of inflaming public opinion to such an extent that the tragedy of Carthage became possible. Why then did his name appear in this revelation as that of a trusted assistant of Joseph? John Taylor furnishes the answer to that question. He says, respecting John C. Bennett, I was well acquainted with him. At one time he was a good man, but fell into adultery and was cut off from the church for his iniquity. At the time of the revelation he was a good man, but he was overcome by the adversary and made the slave of his carnal desires. The Lord knew him and warned him. His reward shall not fail, if he receive counsel. He shall be great, if he do this, etc. Bennett did not heed these warning ifs from him who knew what was in his heart. In the revelation recorded in Doctrine and Covenants 124, the Lord counseled John C. Bennett that his reward shall not fail if he receive counsel and if he continue to do the Lord's will. However, he did not heed these instructions and consequently forfeited the blessings promised to him in this revelation. Some may question why John C. Bennett was allowed to hold positions of leadership and trust in Nauvoo. At the time the revelation recorded in Doctrine and Covenants 124 was received, and when he was appointed as an assistant president in the first presidency, Brother Bennett was striving to do what was right. The Lord does not withhold present blessings because of future sinful behavior. He blessed King David as long as he was faithful and did not withhold opportunity, although he had foreknowledge of David's future transgressions with Bathsheba. As long as one obeys, the blessings come. Doctrine and Covenants 124, 18 through 19. And again I say unto you that it is my will that my servant Lyman Wright should continue in preaching for Zion, in the spirit of meekness, confessing me before the world, and I will bear him up as on eagle's wings, and he shall beget glory and honor to himself and unto my name, that when he shall finish his work, I may receive him unto myself, even as I did my servant David Patent, who is with me at this time. Elder Orson Pratt said, the Lord accepted of him. He died in the faith, a martyr in Missouri. I have taken him to myself. David W. Patent died in the faith, and so far as we know, holds the keys of the presidency of the 12 in the world to come. Doctrine and Covenants 124, 19 continued, and also my servant Edward Partridge. As a result of the many persecutions he endured, his faith was broken and he died on May 27, 1840, at the age of 47. Of his demise, the prophet wrote, he lost his life in consequence of the Missouri persecutions, and he is one of that number whose blood will be required at their hands. This was not to be his final epitaph, however, for the Lord pronounced in a revelation in January 1841 that Edward Partridge is with me at this time. Doctrine and Covenants 124, 19 continued, and also my aged servant Joseph Smith Sr., who sitteth with Abraham at his right hand, and blessed and holy is he, for he is mine. President John Taylor said, who was Abraham? A patriarch. Who was Father Joseph Smith? A patriarch. It is quite fitting, therefore, that he should associate with Abraham, who was and is also a patriarch. And perhaps, if we had the full details given, we should have an account of other patriarchs as well. But here is a place alluded to where he went when he left this world. Doctrine and Covenants 124, 20. And again, verily I say unto you, my servant George Miller is without guile. He may be trusted because of the integrity of his heart, and for the love which he has to my testimony. I, the Lord, love him. Elder Joseph B. Worthland said, "In Latter-day Scriptures we read that the Lord called Edward Partridge to be bishop for the church because his heart is pure before me. For he is like unto Nathanael of old, in whom there is no guile." And another revelation to the prophet Joseph Smith, the Lord said, "My servant George Miller is without guile. He may be trusted because of the integrity of his heart, and for the love which he has to my testimony. I, the Lord, love him." These passages of Scripture help me understand what the Lord could see in Edward Partridge and George Miller, and give me some insight into what he expects of the saints. I believe the Savior was seeking purity of soul in those he called to be his 12 apostles. When he spoke of being without guile, he referred to something far deeper than outward appearance. He was reaching into the soul, to the very heart of righteousness. He was touching the key to goodness and to the Christ-like life. To be without guile is to be pure in heart, an essential virtue of those who would be counted among true followers of Christ. He taught in the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." He revealed to the prophet Joseph Smith that Zion is the pure in heart, and that a house is to be built in Zion in which the pure in heart shall see God. If we are without guile, we are honest, true, and righteous. All of these are attributes of deity and are required of the saints. Those who are honest are fair and truthful in their speech, straightforward in their dealings, free of deceit, and above stealing, misrepresentation, or any other fraudulent action. Honesty is of God, and dishonesty of the devil. The devil was a liar from the beginning. Righteousness is living a life that is in harmony with the laws, principles, and ordinances of the gospel. After reading together Doctrine and Covenants 1:24, 15, and 20, perhaps you could help your children find out what it means to live with integrity on page 31 of For the Strength of Youth, A Guide to Making Choices. Living with integrity means that you love truth with all your heart, more than you love personal comfort, popularity, or convenience. It means doing what is right simply because it is right. What did the Lord say specifically about George Miller in verse 20 because of the integrity of George's heart? It says that he would be trusted. Invite your children to set a goal to show integrity this week. Doctrine and Covenants 1:24-21. I therefore say unto you, I seal upon his head the office of a bishopric, like unto my servant Edward Partridge, that he may receive the consecrations of mine house, that he may administer blessings upon the heads of the poor of my people, saith the Lord. Let no man despise my servant George, for he shall honor me. Consider sharing with others, as the Savior did in Doctrine and Covenants 1:24, 12-21, the Christ-like attributes you see in them. How has he expressed to you his love and trust? Read Doctrine and Covenants 1:24, 22-44, looking for why the Lord commanded church members in Nauvoo to build a house for visitors and a temple. As you ponder the Lord's instruction in Doctrine and Covenants 1:24, 22-24, and 60-61, think about how you can make your home and your ward a place like what the Lord had envisioned for Nauvoo. The saints are commanded to build both a house for the entertainment of strangers and a temple in Nauvoo. The Lord commanded church members to build two houses in his name, the Nauvoo house and the Nauvoo temple. The Nauvoo house was to be a hotel or a house of boarding where visitors and travelers could stay and contemplate the word of the Lord and receive counsel. During a conference held in Nauvoo on August 29, 1842, Hiram Smith explained, "It is important that the Nauvoo house should be finished, that we may have a suitable place wherein to entertain the great ones of the earth and teach them the truth. Because Joseph and Emma Smith were to donate the land on which the hotel, the Nauvoo House, would be built. The Smith family was to live there and serve as the hosts. The Spirit of Revelation directs the saints to build a fine temple for the entertainment of strangers. There is no greater inducement for travelers to visit a place than good hotel accommodations. This revelation proves that the Lord wanted the tourists of the world to visit and become acquainted with the saints. These were not to be surrounded by a wall of isolation. They had nothing to hide from the world. Shortly before his death in 1844, the prophet instructed the saints to stop work on the Nauvoo house so that more resources and manpower could be directed toward constructing the Nauvoo temple. At the time of the martyrdom of the prophet Joseph Smith, the Nauvoo house remained uncompleted. Unfortunately, the Nauvoo house was never finished according to church leaders' plans. Doctrine and Covenants 124, 22 through 25. Let my servant George, and my servant Lyman, and my servant John Snyder, and others build a house unto my name, such a one as my servant Joseph shall show unto them, upon the place which he shall show unto them also. And it shall be for a house for boarding, a house that strangers may come from afar to lodge therein. Therefore let it be a good house, worthy of all acceptation, that the weary traveler may find health and safety while he shall contemplate the word of the Lord, and the cornerstone I have appointed for Zion. This house shall be a healthful habitation, if it be built unto my name, and if the governor which shall be appointed unto it shall not suffer any pollution to come upon it. It shall be holy, or the Lord your God will not dwell therein. Why do you feel the Lord has always commanded his people to build temples unto his holy name? Consider making a list of reasons you find in Doctrine and Covenants 124, 25 through 45, and verse 55. You might find others in a hymn like We Love Thy House, O God, or the video, What is a Temple? Doctrine and Covenants 124, 25 through 27. And again, verily I say unto you, let all my saints come from afar, and send ye swift messengers, yea, chosen messengers, and saying to them, come ye with all your gold and your silver, and your precious stones, and with all your antiquities, and with all who have knowledge of antiquities, that will come, may come, and bring the box tree, and the fir tree, and the pine tree, together with all the precious trees of the earth. And with iron, with copper, and with brass, and with zinc, and with all your precious things of the earth, and build a house to my name, for the Most High to dwell therein. The building of the Nauvoo Temple was the fifth attempt by the Latter-day Saints to build a house of the Lord. The other attempts include Jackson County, Missouri, Kirtland, Ohio, and far west in Adirondack, Missouri. Only the Kirtland Temple was completed before the one in Nauvoo, and it was desecrated, as Brigham Young explained. The saints had to flee before mobocracy, and by toil and daily labor they found places in Missouri where they laid the cornerstones of temples, in Zion and her stakes, and then had to retreat to Illinois to save the lives of those who could get away alive from Missouri, where fell the apostle David W. Patton with many like associates, and where were imprisoned in loathsome dungeons and fed on human flesh Joseph and Hiram and many others. But before all this had transpired, the temple at Kirtland had fallen into the hands of wicked men, and by them been polluted like the temple at Jerusalem, and consequently it was disowned by the Father and the Son. The Lord instructed church members to donate their precious things of the earth and skills for the construction of a temple in Nauvoo, just as they had done in Kirtland, Ohio. The saints faithfully volunteered much of their time, labor, and means to construct the Nauvoo temple. President Gordon B. Hinckley explained, in 1841, 2 years after the prophet Joseph Smith came to Nauvoo, he broke ground for a house of the Lord that should stand as a crowning jewel to the work of God. No effort was spared. No sacrifice was too great. Through the next 5 years, men chiseled stone and laid footings and foundation. walls, and ornamentation. Hundreds went to the north, there to live for a time to cut lumber, vast quantities of it, and then bind it together to form rafts, which were floated down the river to Nauvoo. Beautiful moldings were cut from that lumber. Pennies were gathered to buy nails. Unimaginable sacrifice was made to procure glass. They were building a temple of God, and it had to be the very best for which they were capable. Under the prophet Joseph Smith's direction, the cornerstones of the Nauvoo Temple were laid on April 6, 1841. The completed temple was dedicated on April 30th and May 1st, 1846, almost 2 years after the death of Joseph and Hiram Smith, and after most of the saints had left Nauvoo for the Salt Lake Valley. In October 1848, a fire destroyed much of the temple, and in 1850 a tornado destroyed one of the remaining outer walls and weakened 2 others. By 1853, the temple was in ruins. Under the direction of President Gordon B. Hinckley, the church constructed a new temple in Nauvoo, Illinois, on the original temple site and dedicated it in June 2002. Doctrine and Covenants 124:28. And there is not a place found on earth that we may come to and restore again that which was lost unto you, or which he hath taken away, even the fullness of the priesthood. As construction of the temple in Nauvoo, Illinois began, the prophet Joseph Smith and the counselors of the first presidency wrote to church members and explained the reasons for building the house of the Lord. The temple of the Lord is in process of erection here in Nauvoo, where the saints will come to worship the God of their fathers, according to the order of his house and the powers of the holy priesthood, and will be so constructed as to enable all the functions of the priesthood to be duly exercised, and where instructions from the Most High will be received, and from this place go forth to distant lands. The prophet Joseph Smith knew that the Nauvoo temple would take years to build. He also knew that he might not live to see its completion. Elder Franklin G. Richards of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles wrote, "When the Spirit prompted Joseph Smith that his life's work was drawing to a close, and when he saw that his earthly days might be ended before the completion of the temple, he called a chosen few and conferred upon them the ordinances of the holy endowments, so that the divine treasures of his mind might not perish from the world with his death." On May 4th, 1842, the prophet arranged the upper room of his brick store in Nauvoo to represent the intended interior of the temple. The prophet Joseph Smith later recorded, "I spent the day in the upper part of the store, instructing a group of priesthood leaders in the principles and order of the priesthood, attending to washings, anointings, endowments, and the communication of keys pertaining to the Aaronic priesthood, and so on to the highest order of the Melchizedek priesthood, setting forth the order pertaining to the Ancient of Days, Adam, and all those plans and principles by which anyone is enabled to secure the fullness of those blessings, which have been prepared for the church of the firstborn, and come up and abide in the presence of the Elohim, God the Father, in the eternal worlds." In this council was instituted the ancient order of things for the first time in these last days. And the communications I made to this council were of things spiritual, and to be received only by the spiritually minded. And there was nothing made known to these men but what will be made known to all the saints in the last days, so soon as they are prepared to receive, and a proper place is prepared to communicate them. Therefore, let the saints be diligent in building the temple and all houses which they have been, or shall hereafter be, commanded of God to build. After the martyrdom of the prophet, church members continued work on the Nauvoo temple, even after the decision had been made to leave Nauvoo. From December 1845 to February 1846, as construction continued, endowments for the living were performed in the temple. Thousands of church members were endowed before they began their exodus to the Salt Lake Valley. The Lord's people have always been a temple-building people. Just as in ancient times temples are built in our day so that sacred ordinances can be revealed and performed, and the oracles or revelations of God can be received. The Lord explained that the central purpose For building the Nauvoo temple was to provide a place for the Most High to dwell therein, that he may come to and restore again the fullness of the priesthood. President Joseph Fielding Smith wrote, Joseph Smith said, if a man gets a fullness of the priesthood of God, he has to get it in the same way that Jesus Christ obtained it, and that was by keeping all the commandments and obeying all the ordinances of the house of the Lord. I hope we understand that. If we want to receive the fullness of the priesthood of God, then we must receive the fullness of the ordinances of the house of the Lord and keep his commandments. Let me put it in a little different way. I do not care what office you hold in this church. You may be an apostle. You may be patriarch, a high priest, or anything else, and you cannot receive the fullness of the priesthood unless you go into the temple of the Lord and receive these ordinances of which the prophet speaks. No man can get the fullness of the priesthood outside of the temple of the Lord. There was a time when that could be done. For the Lord could give these things on the mountaintops, no doubt. That is where Moses got it. That is no doubt where Elijah got it. And the Lord said that in the days of poverty, when there was no house prepared in which to receive these things, that they can be received on the mountaintops. But now you will have to go into the house of the Lord, and you cannot get the fullness of the priesthood unless you go there.